so manju shri ye, namo so shri ye, namo dhamma shri ye so hai. Ye chu dang zu gi chu na la, jang chu ba do ta ne gyab su chi, da gi chu nye gi be so na gi, do la ben je sang ge zhu ba shu. Chu dang zu gi chu na la, jang chu ba do ta ne gyab su chi, da gi chu nye gi be so na gi, do la ben je sang ge zhu ba shu. Chu dang zu gi chu na la, jang chu ba do ta ne gyab su chi, da gi chu nye gi be so na gi, do la ben je sang ge zhu ba shu. 一定出现没多少，让那些你的点把题，上天心中没点发音，若跟那大些那只把手，不如让他们打拉杆的呀，他呀，别。So please adjust your sitting posture according to the 7 meditative postures of Vairocana. So if you are unable to sit in this posture for a long time, then at least sit for a short while for spaciousness. Then think, all sentient beings have been my mothers. All sentient beings have been my mothers, not just once, but for numberless times. All sentient beings are as kind as my mother in this life. Even though all kind mother sentient beings want happiness and do not want even a small suffering, but due to engaging wrongly in objects of adoptions and abandonment, they only experience suffering. In our mind, sincerely generate loving kindness towards all kind mother sentient beings, thinking, how nice it would be if all kind mother sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness, that is virtue. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. I will cause them to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Lama, please bless me to be able to do so. Next, we generate compassion towards all suffering mother sentient beings, thinking, how nice it would be if the bodies of all suffering mother sentient beings were free from the class discordant with accomplishing virtue, such as physical pain, suffering, and the problems caused by 4 elements. May their bodies be free from the discordant class. I will free their bodies from the discordant class. Lama, please bless me to be able to do so. How nice it would be if the minds of all suffering mother sentient beings were free from the class discordant with accomplishing virtue, such as mental suffering, fear, and coarse and subtle discursive thoughts. May their minds be free from the discordant class. I will free their minds from the discordant class. Lama, please bless me to be able to please bless me to be able to do so.
Please do what you're doing. Man, that's how we zealous of marching, but Hara,
How nice it would be if the speech of all suffering mother sentient beings were free from the class discordant with accomplishing virtue, such as those negative, coarse and subtle speech. May their speech be free from the discordant class. I will free their speech from the discordant class. Lama, please bless me to be able to do so.
What is just watching it, using one possibly be shower people on the beach or Tabata and the general. So she did all that we shall do the same Lama in Shinjuku. So this is never changes.
How nice it would be if the three doors of all suffering mother sentient beings were free from the class discordant with accomplishing virtue. I will free their three doors from the discordant class. I will cause their three doors to be free from the discordant class. Lama, please bless me to be able to do so.
What is just watching I see it up. She made that the way you look at the channel. Or she did all that we shall do the same Lama in Shinjuku. So this is never changes.
How nice it would be if all suffering mother sentient beings were free from all suffering and the causes of suffering that are non-virtues. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I will free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. Lama, please bless me to be able to do so.
What is just watching I see it up. For the Sugu Duan do Cosilla from Yerala project, I think Yara and Yata want to send the Compara. Later when you go Suda, Yata want to send you see the 20% to Compara with the children of the show. This in the budget chance points.
Next, we generate bodhicitta. First, we ask ourselves, who should take on the responsibility to free all mother sentient beings from the sufferings of samsara and of lower realms? I should take on the responsibility to free all mother sentient beings from the sufferings of samsara and lower realms. Even though I should take on the responsibility, I do not have the ability to do so now. Who has such abilities? Only those who have achieved the perfectly complete enlightenment have the abilities to do so. Therefore, for the sake of all mother sentient beings, by all means, I will achieve the state of enlightenment.
Next
we generate all-encompassing yoga mind. The aspiring conventional bodhicitta that thinks, for the sake of all mother sentient beings, I will achieve the state of enlightenment. These transform into a perfect, complete mundis, one's heart. And the ultimate bodhicitta, that is one's mind becoming in one taste with emptiness, the lack of inherent existence. These transform into a white five-pronged vajra on top of the mundis. Next, we meditate on emptiness for a short while. That I do not exist inherently one with, nor or inherently different from the aggregates. Thus, I do not exist inherently. So if the I and the aggregates were inherently one, then the I and the aggregates will become inseparable one. If the I and the aggregates were inherently different, then they would become totally unrelated or unrelatedly different. So ascertain that the I and the aggregates do not exist inherently one or inherently different in dependence on these reasonings. Also, it is important to conjoin whatever roots of virtue that we perform through our three doors with the six perfections. Thus, to conjoin it with the perfections of generosity. The nature of generosity is a mind of giving. And these 2 hours of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma is for the sake of accomplishing happiness and eliminating the sufferings of all sentient beings. Next is morality. The nature of morality is a mind of abandonment. During these 2 hours of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma, I will properly abandon my physical and verbal negativities so that they do not manifest. Next is patience. The nature of patience is an undisturbed mind. And during these 2 hours of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma, I will patiently accept any physical or mental hardships that occur. Next is joyous effort. Joyous effort. The nature of joyous effort is a mind that takes delight in virtue. I will take delight in the virtue of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma. Next is meditative concentration, meditative concentration. And the nature of meditative concentration is the mind that single-pointedly focuses on any virtuous object. So during these 2 hours of listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma, I will single-pointedly focus my mind on the virtuous object and do not get controlled by the distractions or negative discursive thoughts. And the last one is wisdom. The nature of wisdom is a knower that thoroughly distinguishes phenomena. So I will unmistakenly and properly understand the words and the meanings of the teachings that I listen to, contemplate, and meditate on. Set motivation. For the sake of all mother sentient beings, I will achieve the state of enlightenment. For this purpose, I'm going to receive the commentary on the Lam Rim teaching and practice accordingly in order to benefit sentient beings.
Thank you. 한번 이제 개체 모습이 저거로 무슨 시대 딱 양자 로직 있잖아. 읽었어야 되나. 한번 대도 봐라 니시 사이분다 동문 대도 해서 그 니시 동부 가자 니스비니 이 처방이 비니 이게 데비 찌자는 비니 이게 다른 게 니에서 또 한번 니시고 들어와 그래서 시작이 한다 뭐 계속 시도
So in order to realize emptiness, it is very important to understand these four essential points. So we have already gone through four essential points several times. And as a reminder, and also by going through it, then it will strengthen our understanding or our memory that keep in our mind. So what are these four essential points? The first one is the point of ascertaining the object of negation. And the second one is points of ascertaining the pervasion. The third one is point of ascertaining the absence of truly existent one. And the last one is points of ascertaining the absence of truly existent many.
시단이 신나는 것은 이 방법 전도사리 이 방법을 가지고 실사로와 이 방법을 뒤집어 만지 현실을 지다 나와나 신을 수나 들어와 만지 현실을 지다 나와나 시된 것은 바데 예 손두바데 단니 보세요.
이건 생기기에 나와
현실을 지다 나와나 시 나지다 나와나 시데 뇌스도 같이 뇌스도 같이 좀 많이나 다 가자 가자 예스와
So the points of ascertaining the object of negations, in brief, is to identify the I that is apprehended by the self, by the innate self-grasping.
다 되게 jel라마서 다 이 담보된 로살다. 니 니바데 그래서 보더라. 니 니바데 나노 가르스나 니 니바데 간다. 거기 비니스 되려다. 거기 비니스 와. 만지 리시 지다 나오나시 여바이나 다 보다 지다 다들 가도 요고 레스 다바도 니리스 들어와. 만지 리시 지다 나오나시 나랑 생기 주바지 여바이나 지다 드마 가루를 만다와 지요고레스 나간다 지다 드마 가루 요고레스 내 처방이 맞대리 처방이 있어.
So the first one is to identify the I that appears to the innate self-grasping. So it appears as inherently existent or exists by way of its own characteristics. So this is how the I appears to the innate self-grasping. So if self or I exists as it appears, then it must exist as one or different. So this is the second point, the point of ascertaining the pervasion. So it must exist if the self or the I exists as it appears, then it must exist either as one or different. And it doesn't go beyond those two.
그래 가서 네 아무니바는 로사를 가슴 회사로와 소치도 막 뒤치고 막 가서 네 손바닥 갈리고 와 아니 손바닥 가르스나 아 데비치가 되는 게 네스 디카도 되고 그랬어 다들 가서 막 로야 디카도 놓고 와.
So the first 2 points, the points of ascertaining the object of negations and the pervasions, so whatever they have just mentioned is a brief explanation and is also the reminder of the first 2 points. So then we are at the third point, which is the point of ascertaining the absence of truly existent one.
아니 손바디나로 가서 가르스나 데비치가 되는 게 네스 와들라 다시 슈차저도 마야 앉아 모두 뒤지지 말와 같이 한다 다분히 장이지 주변 오지나 스타트를 내고 다분히 장이 주변 오지스나 하고도 상지장 뒤에 가서스나 다 켈랑바 열매바 무슨 죄 너무 뒤치와 다들 죄 소요와 죄 담보데 다분히 장이 주변 오지스나 다 켈랑바 열매바 찬다든 리시 같이 쉬서와 이게 안 되지 뭐 그렇다 비슷 가로와 다 켈랑바 된바
So to remind all of us the point that we have, the explanations that we have gone through in relation to the third point, the point of ascertaining the absence of truly existent one. So in brief is if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then the first fault that is listed by Buddha Palita is asserting self would be pointless.
你记住啊，得军你把的，这个路的军你把的军有啥子上我得当我的，他不你让你这个我军呢在他第二路上当我的，实在是军有在西藏路的的，他不你让你这个我军是呢，他忙不就军有，我说他从这些开始学啥了哇，他现在那些学没的，把多多的，他不你让你这个我军是呢，他忙不就，他忙不就军有路上，不的，这是不是有那个什么？
So since we have already gone through it, then I will just list the faults instead of explaining it. So the first fault is it will be pointless to assert a self if the self and the aggregates were inherently one. So if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then this is the basis upon which these faults would follow. So we have this is like the foundations upon which then this is the foundations then many faults will follow if you assert such if you set such assertions. So the first fault is pointless to assert the self, and the second one is if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, the second fault is the self would be many.
我的是，他们就得了，上去这个接什么的哇？接什么的？大部分上去这个我接意思呢？他接什么的？他经济阶段就是我是他接什么的的，是吧？他经济阶段就是，那这些开始学啥的哇？
So again, if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, the self would arise and disintegrate.
通过经济阶段，因为大家经济阶段就是我是他接他嘛得的，是吧？经济阶段因为大经济阶段他我是就是哇。
So the third fault is the self would arise as disintegrate, just like the aggregates.
我嘛，但那个厂的这个那个我还是我这个平常，这我嘛到的两家，到不让你这个我记呢，我记是呢，到个到吧娘，那个嘛就是说哇，就是得见你嘛，人家多的得嘞，到不让你这个就是呢，就是了的，但的嘛，这个嘛的，你就是说，这嘛就这嘛，譬如我嘛就是说的了，看看，这嘛理解了哇，那搞的是了是呢。 那到经济阶段就是你等到还不就我不知道，这样子大那时候的接啊，给几来接人，给几来留人就是，肯定会有的。你有的时候的，大那时候的，这样子给几来接啊，给几来你吧，你有的是，给几来经济阶段的有的是。你那大个人，经济阶段就是觉得个人也是在经济阶段的，你前面写过的，是吧？那当不到的那时候的。 맞아. 맞아. 기지기지는 기지체가 요리です. 뭐 공부라 기지체가 요소로 어디 요리스. 나도 뭐 지금 동사들 하고 제고다. 아무도 여봐지. 그래서 뭐 뜻주요다도 맞게 되고
So then these three faults are listed by Buddha Palita, and then to connect with the third fault, the self would arise as disintegrate, listed by Buddha Palita. And Glorious Chandrakirti, in his Entering the Middle Way auto-commentary, also sets forth three faults. So in general, so the third point mentioned by listed by Buddha Palita, the self would arise as disintegrate. In a general context, the self, the I, or the person, or the aggregates, they do arise as disintegrates momentarily. So, however, we need to understand why, by saying the self, why the self would arise as disintegrate, become one of the faults, if the self and the aggregates become inherently one.
对。刚才看到这，只能讲说，看到空北京什么的，到经济阶段就是我的是吧？不，你觉得来我话的话，到经济阶段就是我的，倒不让你这个我进呢。 到经济阶段就是我的是，要听到这里是吧？ 다 공부 깨지나 진지 제발 진도 다들 진지 제발 여러분 뭐서 되게 대단하네 하고 너는 공부도 깨지라 지금 여러와 깨지라 너도 그래 라이 유튜브에 다 되는 거다 라이 유튜브에 다 돼. 나 깨지라 진지 제발 뭐이나 그 맨디고 말해 라이 유튜브에 다 돼. 그 반다 와 라이 유튜브 다 돼. 나다 깨지라 진지 제발 just 다 간디 요것이나 다 이니 가다 다 응하시니 이제와데 이게 두요 말해서 그러와 다 응하시니 라니 주베 다데 다 안다 kinji sheba jusna kichi ngashila 그러와 kumbo kichi jipa sheba 기도 다 라니 주베 kichi ngashila 이니 kinji sheba kichi ngashila 이와데 jipa chi도 jus나 선 지금 말해서 kichi ngashila 지와 kichi ngashila 아마 심만이 지금 jus나 지금 말해서 나이 또 봐서 왔다. 이나시 이게 제발나 이게 너무도 심하니 이제와 치자려고 요거보다 이거 아빠가 제발 이제는 따라 챙다 그래서 이거 이게 두고 뭐 이거 내 마토디 어찌와서 챙도가 뭐 이거 이거 내 마토디 기징아만에 맞아 주 가서 기징아만에 심마마 주마 너디 주들래 그래 주도 매바이나 나마도 심만이 주도 매 지기 겨와도 매 겨와도 치스나 지와 뒤로 말해서 그다 지와 뒤로 말해서 나중에 내가 이게 나와서 그 도움을
So the third fault listed by Buddha Palita, which is the self, would arise as disintegrate. So if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then the self would arise as disintegrate. So meaning, in general, when we say aggregates or the self or the I or the person, they do arise as disintegrate momentarily. However, if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then this inherently persistent I or self would also go through the arising and disintegration momentarily as well. However, it is not reasonable or is not reasonable for the inherently existent self to go through such momentarily changes because momentarily arising and production because the earlier moments and the later moments of the self would become unrelated. The relation or the connections between the earlier and the later moments of the self would be severed. So the fault would such fault would follow. So when we talk about continuum is collections of earlier and later moments. So if the earlier and later moments were severed, then there is no more continuum. Then if there's no more continuum, and if the earlier and later moments were severed, and if the earlier and later moments were severed, then or cut, then it will be impossible for one to remember past life.
너도 가다 요즘 뒤에서 그런 진짜 그거를 체험하는 필라마에 되게 되고다 나는 진짜 그거 체험하거나 가사데 나랑 진짜 두비 뒤지 제거 와 나랑 모든 게 두비 진짜 제거다 그러 가사데 나랑 진짜 두고 필내서디 나랑 진짜 두고 필내 전에 가사데 진짜 제거 내 가사데 진짜 제스나 저기다 와
So these faults will follow if someone asserts that if someone asserts the self or the person exists inherently or exists by way of its own character. So if someone asserts that a person existed, if the person is asserted as inherently existent or exists by way of his own character, then this person or the person would have would necessarily go through the inherent existent arising and disintegration. So the disintegration and the arising that self go through will be inherent existent as well. So the person would inherently arise and would inherently disintegrate, or intrinsically arise intrinsically disintegrates.
오 데려와 네 간다데 뭐 다음은 집을 뭐 죄서 무슨 내고다 간다로와 가자랑 그 진지비 진지시스나 다 죄서 오세 와데 네 거란데라 간다 이마 죄서인데 지워팀 뭐 머리 진지 와 지워팀 뭐 머리 위치 네 님바데 레시바 취세비 해봐 레시비 취세비 해봐 다레 마시보다 취비 해봐 다 대선 뭐다 대죄선 와 대죄서다 내가 누구 요사데 나분이 너희 집에 뭐 지이나 되게 좀 도도 요사서 될도 나분이 아주 집에 뭐 지이스나 아 건다 산지적 죄서 또 뭐지 어디 더 잡아기 죄서 다라 죄서요
Kyun 대양 가다 kyun sumba 대랑 출기하네로. kyun sumba 대.
뭐다 이거 무엇을 잡고 하는 말이야 지와 가지고 있어는 말이야 지와 공부들 막 이제 내고와 지와 가지고 지와 우리 받은 거 숨바들만 뒤에 내고 이제 내고 근데 너도 요새 대화 나분이랑 이 집에 뭐 지이스나 나와 잡이도 지와 나시 지금 뭐도스 대체 지금 뭐도스 제 당보대 제님바다 레시바 그가다 취세는 내가 참 제님바 다제 숨바다 시바다 참 어디 제소데 나와다 버다
So glorious Chandrakirti in the entering the middle way auto commentary sets forth three faults as well. And the first fault, which is unreasonable to have a memory of former lives, or unable to remember past lives. So this is the first fault listed by Chandrakirti in relation to the third fault listed by Buddhapalita. So then the second fault and the third fault listed by Chandrakirti is Lama that has been created would be wasted. And the third fault is meeting with action one has not done. So these faults would follow if the self, the person, or the I were asserted as inherently one with the aggregates.
어디 저 한번 다녀서데 다다바 제 담보도 마시고와 제 담보도 마시고지 누비라는 시월에 등한 주바 그만 주바 하는 막 다다바 있어 간다랑 진이 있어 대다 지도 얼마 있어 이 간다 도도 될자 어제 일 마시고래 어제데 간려서 가자랑 그 진지 주바 때가바이나 랑 진지 주가 간다데 김치 좀 레시피 만들어 보래서 진지 주바 들이 줘바이나 간다 마상마시 가자마시 마시 와 마사 진마시 가자랑 진지마시 와 땡거마도 진거마도 심마로 오라 가자 진거마도 심마 당게 진지 두 그랬어 당게 진지 주바 진마시데랑 진지 주 두스나 소소 참고 그랬어 진마시데 랑 진지 가자 진마시데 랑 진지 주바 두스나 소소와 차로 와 소소와 차로 나 진마시 와 가자 나마도 심마서 당게 진지 주도리 소소와 차사리 소소와 차사리 이 소소 차사리 진지서 다 이거요 그래서 소소 차사리 진마마도 심마니 진지서 와요 이 소소와 차사리 지 거기 이거요 말와 그거 다로 만나는 데 미소가 되게 지치고 얼마 이제 이 소소와 차사리 지치고 이거 너 아니세 지치고 봐도 이마 있을 때 이 말에서 나도 하고 이제 뭐지 가도 되게 와 뭔가 더다 기차에 가서랑 진지 두바 캐나와 기차 들려오도와 가서랑 진지 두바도 캐나 바이스나 진지 두비 진지 제거래 가서 아마 심마 진지 두바 진지식이나 와서 진가식 진지 두바 너게 진지 그냥 소소하잖아 그 진가식하고 진지 두바 소소하잖아 소소하잖아 와서 진가식 지지바 왜요 지지는 말 왜요 좋아 지지는 거 지와가만 이제 심하다고 소소 빼잖아 와 지 마지는 거야 말했어 지와가마다 시간이 다른 사사다 지요 말했어 지요 말했어 지메서디 지와 제마 지오디 아마 지와서 지는 거 알았어 대야요 말아 거다 잡아 지고다
So in the entering the middle way auto commentary, quotes entering the middle way says that for things to be distinct by their character, included in one continuum is illogical. So for things to be distinct by their character, in other words, is different, inherently different, or inherently, to be different by way of its own entity. So for things to be distinct by their character, to include these things which are inherently different in one continuum would be illogical. So with respect to something earlier and something later established as distinct by way of their intrinsic natures, a relationship of dependence between what is later and what is earlier is illogical. So this is based on the assertion if the person is asserted as inherently existent. So if someone asserts that a person is inherently existent, then he or she must also assert that must also assert the inherent productions and inherent disintegration as well, or the productions and the disintegration is also inherent existence. So when you talk about a continuum, when you talk about continuum, continuum is a collection of earlier and later moments, right? So if also the continuum itself would also become inherent existent. So the earlier and the later moment of the continuum, if they become, if they were inherently existent, they would become distinct. They will become distinct, or they will become different. So if they become different, then they will not become a continuum anymore. So they cannot be grouped in one continuum anymore, or they are not part of one continuum anymore because they are distinct by their own character, or distinct intrinsically, or inherently different. So if someone, for example, if someone were to die in this life, then that's all, because how to say, there's no next moment. Because yeah. So yeah, if someone died in this life, then that's all, and then there is no more continuum. The continuum is severed. So and then it will be impossible for someone to remember his past life as well, because it is inherently different.
방가랑 그 생기 주나 간다 가자 지 나시 상황 하는 게 생기 주로 그래
방사기 규로
지나시 그가서 봐 나시 강가랑 그 생기 주로 그래 랑 그 생기 주잖아 수수와 자사겠어 가자 지타 대바는 것이 자다겠어 지타 대바 가나시 인지다 지지 나시 자사겠어 인지다 지지서 그러니까 나 지타 대바 그 지타 대바 인지다 지지서 얘네 지타 대바 이제 지시거로 지지 마치나 나 인지 친구들 싸워자 야 이게 인지기 찍어서 지우서 이렇게 요마로 와 인지 찍으사 지수 그러니 지수도 차서와 지수 차서 난 인지되게 난 지지나 지에도 싸워자 우리 지하다 지지때 나 인지나 지에서 야게 요마로 그때야 맵지나 한 지지야게 요마로 그 차서 기타데 오 그 간다 되는 차도 그래서 다 간다
가서 랑시 두와이나 가서기 규데 양 랑시 두비레스
가서 랑시 두바이나 인나시가 랑시
that's
아니 좀 차스나 소소 차사 하시니까 수자 소 차자데 지와 대박해요 말이스 지와 대박 메서데 지지바 말이스 마시니까 지지바 말이스 와 지지바 말에 지지바 마이데 진짜 지지나 차사です근데 지소소와 대나시 차사 그래서 나시 차스나 지와 대박처럼 요마다 요마라고니 그때 샤데다 인지 지지서 이수도 인지 지와 대마나 나 제시들 저도나 지금 말했어요 오로 이 제가 요마라
Yeah, so if person is asserted as inherent existence, then the continuum of the person, the earlier and the later moments of the continuums of a person would become inherent existence as well. So if the earlier and later moments of a continuum of a person were inherently existent, then they would become distinct, or they will become different, or they will become different or distinct. So if they were different, then they would be then they cannot be posited as one continuum. So if they cannot be posited as one continuum, then it is impossible for someone to remember his past lives. So the example mentioned in the text, it says, in that life at that time I was such and such. And it is like with Devadatta when he remembers a former life. He does not remember I was Yagadatta, whose mind stream is distinct from his. So Devadatta and Yagadatta are two different continuums. So there are two different continuums, or there are two different person. So then if the faults of was it unable to remember past lives follow, sorry, if the faults of unreasonable to have a memory of past lives, then it would be like the Devadatta when he remember past lives, then he will not be able to remember that he was a Yagyadatta, because they are two different mind streams. So just like the previous and the later moments of the mind stream were inherently one, then they become different. So this different will be like Devadatta is unable to remember his past lives, saying that he was a Yagyadatta, because he was these two are different mind stream. So similarly, Yagyatata, when he remember his past lives, then he will not be possible to remember that he was a Devadatta, because their mind streams are different.
당가서 배 당다 델파 세고 코디버스는 세와이나 템바 시자 더 봐요로 템바 시자 더 봐대 다 간다 장주 심바 다다다 배 리심바 더 자지 장주 심바 저로 와 디다 티모 마이 지지래 와 템바 시자 더 봐다 나나마 배 알아 심바 담비 내가 내가 장주 심바 디다 지주서다 내가 심바 더 그러게 나그마 지와디 장주스 지와 예비깔라 알아 심바 또야스 대티야 이거에서 그 제야 유비 근실 가스나 그러면 뭐 이거 지지 차대 지지바 지 타대 말와 나 지지바서 나그마 드니 네 알아 심바 또가 자지 장주스만 미지라 지와란 그래서 지와디 미지 지와란 말에 니 지와디 람바가 알아 심바 또요사 내가서 여다 딜러서 왔다 대이찬이 사마도서 미지 증거에서 그래서 또 그래야 돼. 수속 팀이 뭐 이거 지지를 해서 돼. 다가 돼. 와. 근데 지지바. 지지바서 저거 근데 지타대 바지나 지와나 만들지 이거 지나요 말와. 네, 지타대 바지나. 드리레스 때 뭐되고 지서나 될지 와.
To put it in a simple way, in simple words, is Buddha Shakyamuni, in one of his former lives, then he was a bodhisattva who gave his body to the tigress. So then Bodhisattva Mahasattva. So Buddha Shakyamuni and Bodhisattva Mahasattva, they are they are of one continuum. They are of one uncommon continuum. So and then Buddha Shakyamuni can remember his past lives, saying that, or in my former lives, then I was a Bodhisattva, and then I gave my body to the tigress. So it is possible to remember his past lives, because these two, the Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, they are of one continuum. So because of this reason, then Buddha Shakyamuni can remember his past lives. If Bodhisattva Mahasattva and Buddha Shakyamuni were two different mind stream or continuum, then it would be impossible for Buddha Shakyamuni to remember his past life by saying that I was a Bodhisattva Mahasattva, I gave my body to the tigress.
그러니까 먼저 수수수 빼셔나 수수 무슨 바다 지지바래. 먼저 산지의 지지로. 와. 먼저 장주 심바다 지지. 산지 파바다 지지바 있으라. 와. 먼저 장주 심바다 지타대 말다. 지타대 말에. 맞아. 산지의 산지
마음바로.
오.
마음바.
이거 지타대 말다. 산지가 지지바래스. 그 장주 심바다 지지바래스. 나도 장주 심바다 지지 절대 내려서 나라고 근데 소치 소치 가자지나 누구 눈치는 바리마지네 나 전주스바 오지야 이랬어. 전주스바지 차 있어지 이랬어. 그러와 전주스바 차 있어지 이랬어. 예 손상아 전주스바지 지지랬어. 예 나 산지다 지지랬어. 예 몽벌마 나기 지지만 티모리바 아기도 야도네 산지 사파라 도아이랬어. 예 손상아 산지다 지지랬어. 다들 말했어.
So similarly, then to make it even a simple way, simple to understand, then you can relate it to yourself. So I as an ordinary being, so I is one mind stream. I is of one mind stream with the future Bodhisattva and future Buddha. So uh, I am, I am part of one mind stream with with my future Bodhisattva and then my future Buddha. So meaning, my current state is an ordinary being. So however, if I continue to practice, train, and etc., then gradually I will become a Bodhisattva. So that's why I and the Bodhisattva are of one mind stream. So similarly, I and the Buddha are of one mind stream as well. Because if I continue to practice, then one day, then I will achieve the state of enlightenment. So the I now and the future Buddha are of one continuum.
그래서 지원나마래 샤다 차야리. 나라배 나라게 지원나마 실에 지와. 지원나마 룰라 지와. 근데 여러 가서 소소. 지원나마 룰라 지와. 지가서 이리 여기까지 루데 다 김무마이 다다배 소소 다 지와 상보지. 우리 봐 중에 다 소소 지와 상보 미치와래 여러와. 뭐 지밀라 지와래. 어다 근데 소소게 주지바 세워다 소소 나마 지 용하지. 어우번에 지야 현지치. 주지보고 너 주지바 세워다. But
so being one continuum enable one to to remember one past lives as well. So in my past in past lives, then I was a dog. I was reborn as a dog, and then I was reborn as a deer, for example. So and then in these lives, then I took I was born in the fortunate, I was born in the happy realms as a human being. So current rebirth as a human being and my past rebirths as an animal sentient beings, they are one continuum. So similarly, when I practice, then in the future, when I become a Buddha, Bodhisattva, for example, then all of these are one continuum as well. So because of being one continuum, then one is able to remember past lives, and then one is able to go to the future.
What is it? That was the Jita was the Kadupena, Hela and Ganin in the Wodaji, Jita, right? Hela, you know, try your mother, no matter child, and not child your mother. Hela Hara, Mani Jita, Ginashi. It's a Jita.
So another example is like me. So Vishal referring to himself. So like me and Ken, we are two different continuums. So we are two different continuums. So at any so we are impossible to become one continuum, whether it's in the past, whether it's in current time or in the future. So it is impossible for two different continuums like me and Ken to become one continuum.
What is it? I'm not sure what you're about to hear that. I'm not sure what you're about to that and that the June on the Dua. What you moment, what you moment, between both on your side. Another thing to do as it was. In the Dinima, and the Dodo Zawadi Shibuna, Tapuni Rani to be more cheese not. Not Tapuni Rani to be more cheese not. Ekanda, not seem to be conduct as a Joe Nashilas about the so. You not change to the Don't continue to do not so sort of way. In this also Chasana, what you have to your marks. What you want to your marks, not in the machine, but you got to be visual. We can turn something that day.
So the first fault is unreasonable to have a memory of former lives. In other words, it's impossible to remember past lives. So this fault would follow if person is asserted as inherently one. So if as inherent existent, if the person is asserted as inherent existent. So if person is asserted as inherent existence, then if the person or the self is asserted as inherently one with the aggregates, then the earlier and later moments of a continuum of a person will become inherent existent as well. And if they were to become inherent existence, then they will become different. If they were to become different, then it would be impossible to remember past lives. So this is the explanations about the first fault. And the text says, in our system, a single mind stream of earlier and later moments is not contradictory, even though it disintegrates in each moment. Therefore, the memory of former lives is valid. So, meaning that in our own system, earlier and later moments of a single continuum, it goes through. It is a momentarily. Sorry, it disintegrates momentarily. So even though they disintegrate momentarily, doesn't mean that it does not. It doesn't mean that they become two different continuums. So since they do not become two continuums, therefore, memory of former lives is valid. So in people who have, in the text says, in people who have not realized the meaning of this, the frequent statement in sutras in the past there was this person generates the first wrong view out of 4 bad views that were taught, and that are based on an extreme associated with the past. So the 4 bad views refers to the bad views of permanent, impermanent, being both, and neither. So these are the 4 bad views. So then it refers to the permanent one. So the bad views of permanence. So associated with the past, then the two, the person at the time of Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time are one. So are one is based on if the person is asserted as inherently one, or inherent existence, sorry, asserted as inherent existence, then the two, the person at the time of the Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time, then they become inherently one as well. So moreover, if they were compounded phenomena, they would disintegrate moment by moment and therefore could not be one. So if someone asserts person as inherent existent, so if they are inherent existent, then whether the person at the time of the Buddhahood or the time prior to Buddhahood, they would become inherent, they will become permanent. So if they were inherently one, then they will become permanent. So if they were permanent, then they will not disintegrate momentarily. So as a compounded phenomena, Compounded phenomena, then they will disintegrate momentarily, right? So, however, if person were asserted as inherent existent, then the person with at the time of the Buddhahood, prior to that, then they will become permanent. Then if they were permanent, then they will not disintegrate momentarily.
그 된다스는 그것도 사실은 뭐 된다더니 맞아 강사 가시니 가다 신바 이 신이 받은 거를 된다 도도시나 가사로 와이 신이 받은 거 받다 주인이 받은 누구를 간다 된다 도도 와 주신이 받은 거 주인이 받은 누구지 그러면 제가 제가 가서 주지 받은 거 이거 된 받더라 제가 된 받더라 주지 받은 거를 주신이 받지랑 가서 제가 된 동요 이거 돼야 기가 뭐와 돼요 된다 도도시는 가서 제가 된 받아 다 유다 이 제바 제가 지라자니 되게 배 제가 된스 그래서 와 또 이따가 니가 너 시원이 벌써 저만려오니 너 찌니 생각하시니 가당하시니 찌러져 세워하고다 야 저만 내가 저만 정하다 찌지 못 치자 말이야 저거 이제 그래 간다 도도시나 또 간다게 간다 시 찌리에서 듣던 거만 또 간다 주신 이 방법 가당하시니 주신 이 방법 주진이 받쳐 되고 간다 그래 주진이 받쳐
양자디.
너 되게 간다게 하다 강산하시니 스스로가 주신이 받
가상가치
我举行一把，我举嘛有人就说，举行一把过呢，举一把经过嘛的，举一把的，我的是举行过的，可能你举的是老要嘛的是，举的老要嘛，人家刚刚是举一把是不过的，举一把的，对的，举的我的，举的是老的，举的是老要嘛的。那这把的我的举的是老，都比起来讲都是老，这把真的的，哦，对不对？好像我是举的话，虽然都是个。치를 너무 말했어. 치를 너무 말 가르치나. 그 되게 간다데 주신이 막 하시니 주신이 막 오더디 진이 막 오면 진이 받아 수동을 해서 진이 받아. 와. 진이 받아 누구를 모두 그래서 너무 말했어. 내가 너도 들으라. 나 간다 말 내가 너도 들으시라.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it says that in the sutra, it says, I was this in the past, then I was this person, and etc. Yeah. So if those who do not realize the meaning of this, then they would say that, oh, in the sutra, it says, in the past, I was this person. And then they would think that the person at the time of the Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time are one. So they would think in this way, and however, this is a wrong understanding. So what it means is, the meaning of this sutra says that I was this person in the past and etc. So it negates the two, the earlier and the later moments of the same person being different continuums. So it negates the earlier and later moments of a person to be different continuums. So by negating the earlier and later moments of a person being different continuums, it does not establish that the two person is one. They do not establish the two person, the person at the time of the Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time as one. It doesn't establish that. What does it establish is, it establishes that they are one continuum. So the difference here is, it doesn't establish them as one, but rather it establishes that the person at the time of the Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time are one continuum. So these are the one continuum. So these are two different things. One and one continuums are two different things. So by negating by negating the person at the time of the Buddhahood and the person at an earlier time being different continuum, it established that they are one continuum.
또 저번 갈래 오늘 저번 늦지고 저는 노비 시비 간다지 그때 오늘 저번 쓸래 어디 멤버 선제다 멤버를 제시 좀 내가 자 여부 순 내가 저번 알리니스 밀려고 저번 알리니스 노비 되니까 지도 땡자 누구서 더발래 거를 때 노비 멤버 시작도 봐라 멤버 시작도 봐 제시 좀 내가 저번 알리니스 지금 되니까 너 되게 찌니 봐 땡자 누구서 더발래 이렇게 pasado 거야 그 리지오디 리지오디 라고 리지오디 찌도 땜바 말이스 하나 때서 땜바 제대로 보다 저번 말이니까 주신이 봐 까니 주신이 봐 까니 주진이 봐서 서다다 누구요래 마도 찌니 봐서 누구요 말이스 찌니 봐 땡거 저번에 다 도바 들리고 너막 나도 막 원리 두고 말이야 그다 저번에 나도 저번 멈췄잖아 그래서 나는 가다 좀 뭐라
Yeah, so the statements, the frequent statements in the sutras in the past are with this person. So how say there are those who do not understand the words of, in the sutras, and then they they think that Buddha Shakyamuni and Buddha Shakyamuni formalized one of the formalized was a bodhisattva called King Nalui. So this Bodhisattva and Buddha Shakyamuni, for those who do not understand the meaning properly, they say that, or these sutras say that Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva that was and the Bodhisattva, the formalized of Buddha Shakyamuni, as one. So they say that Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva are one. Then to remove their doubt, then the proper understanding of the words in the sutra is I was this I was such and such in the past. It shows that it negates Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva to be different continuums. So it negates that Buddha Shakyamuni and the Bodhisattva in former lives were different continuum. So it negates that position. And what it establishes that they are one continuum. They are not one, but they are one continuum. So the proper understanding of the sutra, of the words in the sutra, is that they are not one, but they are one continuum. After negating the Buddha Shakyamuni and Bodhisattva to be two different continuum.
안다 되게 나부랑이 집에 뭐 지으스나 레시비 취세도 내가 우리 에세
그건 나에게 손을
괜히 받으러 나 괜히 받으러 막 저도 소마는 막 저거 나 인지체는 저세 좋아 나분이랑 이 집에 니 지으스나 나기 집에 너 진짜 지나 맞게 가다 인지체 받을 말이 에세로 빨리 와 진짜 받 인지체 받아 또 지금 말해서 오라 또 지금 말해서 너우리 나 대단히 가서 공부 받는 거 샤자 보다 더 제가 그거 나부랑 이 집에 뭐 지으스나 레시바 취세바 레시바 취세비 내가 참고해서 아무 데지 와
그냥 대기지 니바 대당 응응이 기지 인전도 교바대 네 대당 제와 요래
이거요 근데 나 진짜 그래서 되게 요러
그렇죠.
근데 너도 나랑 생기 주나서 들어 자다 너가 생기 주구나 너가 생기랑 생기 주기 인지 버려 해서 와 너랑 생기 주기 진지 제바이나 좋아 딱히 진감이 집에 진제부터 이지 심하게 누구지나 누구지야 버려 말해서 다 된다 되게 좋아
다 랑싱이 좋아이나 다 그냥 랑싱이 대기지 대교기 오래스
나무디 카두지 내 셰버보다 레븐 용합에 지금 나서 찌기 때도 이거야 말해서 나무디 카두지 나나 나무디 와 얼마 안 되는 시
맞아
레시베 네버리와 바 나부리랑 이 집이 찌나 우리 집에 뭐 찌으스나 레시베 취세비 네버 요리 에세 간리 요리 에세 레시베보다 레븐 용합이 그 간자 찌기 때도 들이 저원 그 시고 아니스 네 나부디 지라들와
Then the second fault is that karma that has been created would be wasted. So again, if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then the karma that has been created would be wasted. So is that both the agent of an action and the experiencer of its effect will not be grouped together on the single basis of the mere I.
다티파 고대 것이나 먼저 다부랑 유지고 뭐지나 내 셰퍼보다 제분 영어 보니 지나서 찌기게도 인도로 말이는 단단히 가서 아무 소속이 레지 사 레지 사우리 그 제분에 인지니어가 거기 증명으로 와. 봐. 내 사보다 대 개념도 가서 제분 영화 말로 하다. 여기야 지금 말로. 단단히 영화 맞아 찌기게도 되비 나서 내 셰퍼보다 제분 영어 보니까 아사 나자 그 다로 이것은 미야 자원이 요 말했어. 요 말로. 내스나 내셔봐 취사와 잘 보세요. 내셔봐 취사 말로. 이 뉴아 요 말에 이부터 다로 미야 요 말에. 근데 그 미야도 내스나 내가 내 지어서 취사는 것도 저 개와서는 그 대화 중앙부터 이런 그 누가 좋아하는 거 잘 보세요. 그와 내셔봐 취사 들어와. 그 개와서는 제부 좋아 주고래. 그 뭐게 내선 제부 좋아 주고래. 근데 누가 당기지 좋아 있나? 내셔봐서 제부 좋아 보니 내가
소소와 차를 왜?
네, 소소 차사는 누구? 이제 차요 많이 쓰고라.
네, 자본랑시 지대 차와이나 내 제보보다 대본 영화보디 대양
맞아, 찌개도.
나 지대도 나전 지대도.
너 내지 싸바다. 내가 내가 좋아하는 거 말아. 맞아, 내가 요새 한번 내지 싸. 되게 내가 봐. 나 단단히 전화 내가 치세도 내봐대. 내가 나분이랑 이 주비 지나 뭐 지나 어때 대가라. 내가 간다. 네, 셰퍼보다 대본 영화 보니 바로 우리 이 두 자리 대가로 지쳐서 그래. 지쳐서디 내가 내 사비니까 대가라 대본 영화 기어 말아. 이 차때 너 뭐하지? 내스다 나서 찍기도 근데 차 쓰고 말했어.
그래서 얘네 내 제보보다 얘네 뒤에
영화 보니 나서 찍기도 근데 차도 요 말. 얘도 이 제서 깨지는 바는 단는 거 아니야. 근데 누구는 아니 그 진짜 무슨 뭐 지키는나 근데 내 셰퍼 버치 대가로 막 이렇게도 dem사다 다고 대가로 미버지 고려마다 이게 들리지는 거 고려마다 아마도 심하스네 계셔도 요 맞다. 요만 작업은 너무 심하 작업은 지치하더라 봐. 지치하다 땐 붙이서 차로 봐. 연다 도도시는 나시선 차요 말로 나시 차 매사디 대분 용게요 말에 가다.
So the fault that karma that has been created will be wasted is that both the agent of an action and the experiencer of its effect could not be grouped together on the single basis of the mere I. So if the person and if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, then there is no more earlier and later moments of a continuum, right? So there is no more earlier and later moments of a continuum because the earlier and the later moments of a continuum will become one. So if they become one, then when an agent of an action they create a karma, then the experience of the result would be for example, if next moment. So it is impossible for a creation of karma when the experience of the result to be one moment. So it will be the first moment and then the next moment, for example, then one will experience the result. So however, if the earlier and later moment become one, so if they were inherently one, then they become one. So if they become one, then it will be impossible for the creator of the karma to experience the result, because it is impossible to experience the result at the same moment as the creations of the negative karma, as the creations of karma. So if it is impossible for the creator of the karma to experience the result, then karma that has been done would be wasted. So the agent of the action will not experience the results of that karma anymore.
만용이 거 요 시달에서 보다 간다. 레 쉐바보다 리지 요바이나. 레 쉐바보다 리버도 만용 군도 그 내가 찾아냈어. 내가 찾아서 보다 간다. 로아 티차로 로아. 그 랑게 진지 주고 찾아로 와.
마용 응원 안.
마용이라. 리버디 만용이라. 다 그런. 니바다 양자 리버 농게 줘야 맞다.
시와이나.
시와이나 리버 농게 요 말와. 예수자 어디서 이 쉐바보다 그러니 레이트긴 리버 만용 이거 그라.
시와이나 제제로
리버 요 말했어. 리버 요 하면은 텔레 쉐바도 주제 로고도 아스라고. 리버 주제.
So it means that if a agent of an actions or creator of an actions, so if before this agent experienced the result of that karma, if this agent pass away, so if this agent pass away, then for those who assert the self exists inherently, then that's all. So if this person pass away, then there will be no person to experience the result of that karma anymore. So if action doer create an action, even if a person create an action, so before this person experience the result, pass away before experience the result, then there will be no one to experience the result of that karma anymore. So because of this, the fault would follow is karma that has been created would be wasted.
Oh, this is what. 나 레시블 취습이니 와서 디지와. 나 손바닥 가서 내 마시 받아 티비니 받아 나분이 랑지 주비. 지이스나 된다 데려와. 나분이 랑지 주비 뭐 지이스나. 내가 간다. 내 마시 받아 티비니 봐. 누군도 왜 사들이
Yeah, so then the third fault is fault of emitting with actions one has not done. So again, this fault will follow if the self and the aggregates were asserted as inherently one.
나한테 다시 공동 가서 때 제가 또 강강님 된 잡지 하니는데 좋아. 내 마시 받아 티비 네 빠져서 가자랑 그 신지 주스나 아부랑 그 신지 주스나 내 계징하시 되게 시바나시 계징하시 때 기타 대봐 지히 차사랬어 지히 차사랬어
가자.
계징하시 기타 대봐 기타 대봐 이 차사랬어 이 차사랬어 이 지히 그래서 와 계징하시 와 기타 대봐 이 차노래 기타 대봐 이 차스나 이지 내사빈 제버게 지지히 생각이 용어라기 용어스나 지신다지 용어라기 이 차노래스 와 이지 용어가 치와 나신이가 돼 나랑이지 그 사람이 진지 좀 밖에 내서나 그 사람이 진지 좀 밖에 내서나 나랑이 진지 주나 나신이가 돼 나랑이 진지 좀 밖에 나 지지 좋아 수수수수 차사리스
유기직나치 대한 소수차
차사리스 수수수수 차사디 내 간사 내 사발은 제부 용어세라고 와 내 사발이나 내 사는 제부는 내 마시보다 집에 아파트다 10만이 때 로가 차들어와 로가 차다디 네 귀찮아 그래서 참 마시보다 집이 내봐 지금 가서 내지 데부데 이제 나기 공도 최신다 내지니 요와 최신지 요와 사야나 제부 되어서 내지 최신은 요약해 말아 그러니 기타대 봐라 나 되는 게 잘 무슨 거야 와 기타대 봐 그 반대 소속에 그 가다 그 최신이 사바디긴 데부데 인지가 미국이나 나 인지기 그 마사바 데부지 이노 두스 와 내 마시 발랑아 나 데부지 이 레션 마사가 이 레진 데부지 이거 두세 같이 봐 잘 모르겠어 와
So the fault of meeting with actions that one has not done is the absurd consequence that the effects of actions accumulated in some distinct mind stream would always be experienced by a different continuum. Yeah. So if person exists inherently, then the earlier and later moments of a continuum will become inherent, would become inherent existent as well. So if they were inherent existent, then they will become different. So if they become different, so the earlier moment of if the earlier moments accumulate karma, then it will be experienced by a different continuum. The result of it will be experienced by a different continuum. So because the earlier and later moments of a continuum were inherently existent, then they would become different. So if they become different, so if one accumulate a karma at earlier moments and experience the result later, then this experiencer of the result would be of a different continuum. So because the earlier and later moments of a continuum, they become different already. So then the actions creator and the experiencer of the result would be different. So then it would be like just now the example, Devadatta and Yajnadatha. So Yajnadatha creates a good karma, creates a virtuous karma. However, the result of this virtuous karma would be experienced by uh, the Devadatta, who is a different continuum from the Yajnadatha. So, and if Devadatta experience the result that he has not done, then this fault will follow, which is the fault of meeting with action one has not done. So because if Devadatta can experience the result of an action that he has not done, then how's it then this is the example to illustrate the third fault. It is impossible to experience the result of of the actions created by other person. So since it is impossible, then this fault, the fault of meeting with action one has not done, would follow. Ngama de chima ngama la de tuba ni de tuba de And the text says, these two faults are associated with the essential point explained above in entering the middle way, that if the person were established by way of its nature, so meaning if the person were exist inherently or exist intrinsically, then its earlier and later moments would not be the same mind stream. So meaning that if person exists inherently, so if person exists inherently, then yeah, so the yeah, 장신이 지디 좋아해나 데 규칙 데 차이 말이스. 중앙치 데네 계직 중앙치 데 규칙 데 차이 말이스. 마차이게 경센데 네 that's all. Yeah. So if person exists inherently, then it will be impossible for the earlier and later moments of the continuum to become one. So they will not become a one continuum. Earlier moment and the later moments would not become one continuum. So they will not become one continuum is because the later moments will not come into existence in dependence on the previous moment. Because if they were inherently one, it also means that the earlier moments and the later moments will become exist by way of its own power. So exist inherently also means that they can exist by way of its own power, then capable to establish themselves, capable to set themselves, or in other ways, they are able to establish self-institutingly. So if they can exist inherently, they can exist by way of its own power. That means the earlier moment and the later moment will become unrelated. So the later moment will not depend on the earlier moment because because they are able to set themselves up, because they are able to establish by way of its own power. So the earlier moment and the later moment become unrelated. So if they become unrelated, then they are no longer one continuum anymore. So if they are not one, if they are not one continuum, if they are not one continuum, then one creates a karma, and if when the result ripens, it will be if one creates if one creates a karma and one experiences the result, then the experiencer of the result would be different from the creator of the karma. Why? Because the experiencer of the result and the creator of the karma are two different continuums. They are not one continuum. So then the experiencer of the result would experience a result of a karma that's not done. So, and however, it is impossible. So it is impossible in this way. These are the faults if someone were to assert that a person exists inherently. So if the creator of the karma and the experiencer of the result, if they are one continuum, then there's no fault saying that one creates the karma and then he experienced the result in next life, for example. So since they are of one continuum, then there's no fault. So however, if you were to say that the previous lives and the next lives, or the previous moment and the next moment were different, then this fault will follow. So the fault of meeting with action, one has not done.
叫我们还啥病这不得，再个啥病，这不得叫什么？为了记是吧？好嘛，这不是用过的，但是用过的是呢，就他这个现在就用，他讲就用的就用都是，就现在这个啊，就现在就用的就差不多是，搞的差不多是呢，这叫我们才我那就这是什么？就等于这不得叫什么？你看叫啊，跟这边没得跟这边用我们都是，反正用我们是，不然你就把人们都是，就把人们都就先查啥的是。那就现在的，那叫我们很可是，也啥的，这不是弄完以后是，那个就不过也是呢。过段时间呢，就他话就想了嘛，都是，就他的话就想完呢，你马上把他这边也把些，可能那边那个就给我去了啥么个吧，这个地方用下去，那差不多的，用下用，也是我，多的，对，这些的，对。
So to summarize this, the root text on wisdom also says, if a god and future human were discrete or different or distinct, their continuum would not be valid. So in the previous lives, if someone was a god, and then in a later life, then the same person was reborn as a human being, then if these were inherently different, if person were intrinsically different, then they will no longer be one continuum anymore. So if they are no longer one continuum anymore, so when in the previous life as a god, then this god create a karma, and then there will be no person to experience the result. There will be no person to experience the result. And however, we still need someone to experience the result, right? We still need to assert the experiencer of the result. Then this person, the opponent would have no choice but to assert that the experiencer of the result would be of a different continuum, because because they have no other way to assert the experiencer of the result anymore. So if they had to assert the experiencer of the result, then it will be of a different continuum.
Oh, this. That was that needs somebody to say that. Needs somebody to say that. That was a niche. That niche was the person. Dimish, the dress. Limit the dress. But there was limit the dress. That was a niche.
And so up to this point, then is the point of ascertaining the absence of truly existent one. Then from this point onwards, then it talks about the fourth essential point, the points of ascertaining the truly existent many. Yeah, so at the third essential point, the arguments is if the self and the aggregates were inherently one, or if the person were inherently one. So these are the arguments at the third essential points. So when we come to the fourth essential point, the point of ascertaining the absence of truly existent many, then it will be a circle around the arguments that the person, if the person were inherently different.
다들 다들 공부를 라시 신도 누가나 맞지 저거다 신도기 신이 제와다 네바다 지바다 뭐데 그 신이 매바 차로 무슨 그 공부 신이 제와다 지바다 네바 뭐데 공부 신이 매바 무슨 거 다들 공부 신이 제와다 지바 네바다 뭐데 차로 무슨 죄들이다 너도 들어와 어디 공부는 다들 다고 공부는 뭐 신도 두바이나 다시 신도 두바이나 다들 죄들 다들 간다로와 다들 간다 공부 신이 제와다 지바 네바다 뭐데 차로 지 무엇이다 너도 들이
So, but what fault is there if you assert the self and the aggregates to be inherently different? So the fault is set forth in the root text on wisdom. If the self were other than the aggregates, so meaning if the self were inherently different from the aggregates, it would not have their characteristics. So in this regard, if the self were different from the aggregates and thus established by way of its distinct nature, so meaning that if the self were intrinsically different from the aggregates, and if the self and the aggregates were inherently different, then the self would not have the characteristics characterize the aggregates as compounded phenomena, which is production, abidance, and disintegration. So this is the first fault that would follow if someone asserts the self and the aggregates as inherently different.
다들 공부를 우리 대학에서 누가 이나 다들하고 뭐래 다들 공부를 와 우리 다들 뭐 누가 이나 공부를 지금 지워들 다들 공부 지니 지워들 집바다 내바다 뭐 내바다로 그래 그 가르나 그아 방안에 대학에서 두비 방안에 지니다 뭐 내바나 차로 그래서 배들 잡고도 와 나간다 배들 잡고 배들 잡고지라도
So if the self exists as something other than the aggregates. So another way of saying this is if the self and the aggregates were inherently different, then the self wouldn't have the characteristics that characterize the aggregates. So then it would be like the example, a horse doesn't have the characteristics of an ox because it is established as an object other than an ox.
다가 고대방 가서 고대부를 발라지는 봐. 다 방안에 대해서도 두비. 대해서도 비슷한 방안에 지니다 뭐 내가 차로 그래서 다다 방안이가 돼. 다 간다 되니 배 타게 바로 와. 못 타게 봐. 예. 타게 봐 대해서 두자리 다들 방안에 지니 방안에 tomba palangi subota palangi raboda da la so bat li ding revese da pesh o de vola jelo ta de palangi chichi da raboda kambada sports da pola chichi so revese yo mares parani mo ta de ba tu saris ta de ba tu saris se di palangi chini raboda ngoda sport kambala ba so bat de mares parante so tu saris da
So a horse doesn't have the characteristics of an ox because they are different. So a horse doesn't have the characteristics of an ox. For example, the body of an ox, the horn of an ox, or the legs of an ox. So a horse doesn't have these characteristics or doesn't have these attributes because a horse as an ox and an ox are different.
Oh, that's 그 바람이 지니 대게를 두 레스로 다들 내가 도로들 좋아. 공부 지니 되다다 뭐니 봐. 이면은 양 가서 쭉 가려 레스 다들 바바나 지고 그래. 좋아. 내가 이면서 한 디마시 다시 다든지 그게 연락이 좋았다. 또 내가 중고 치고 들어와. 디스코 치가 버려. 간다. 된다 도도 들어와. 된다 디시고 그래. 다들 공부 진이 되다 내다보다 뭐 대봐. 내가 이메 내가 쭉 가려서나 다들이 제와다 지바다 니바다 좋아. 다들이 공부 진이 제와다 지바 니바다 좋아. 좋아 근데 잘 그래서 다들 공부 진이 제와다 지바 你把它找，是吧？卫生教你把你把它找，也这是对大的谈的没有，大的这边当时的有的没法查，也是，是吧？大的这边是吧？大的谈的都比西大的谈的都比西，是吧？大的谈的都比大的这边没必有没法查了，我也是，是吧？我今天第二个这次呢，今晚的你把它这次呢，他刚才不能就大把抢啥意思，是吧？我抢啥了，大比赛是吧？结果你把他妈的这次就有的时候他大把嘛的赢多少黑嘛，是吧？抢啥意思是吧？他把下的立马去抢啥意思，是吧？人立马去抢啥的，立马抢的我他妈，大的你看那个，我的立马去了，立马抢的呢，那里面都在几把抢啥的，那里面都是几把抢啥的，是不是？
So then the text says, you may insist it is indeed like that, but well then it will be unacceptable as the observed object that is the basis of one's innate apprehensions designating the verbal convention self, because it is an uncompounded phenomenon, like for instance, a flower in the sky or nirvana. So if the self and the aggregates were inherently different, then the self wouldn't have the characteristics that characterize aggregates. For example, the characteristics are arising, abiding, and disintegrating. So the self wouldn't have the characteristics of arising, disintegrating, and abiding. So another way of saying this is the self would become permanent. So if self become permanent, then the self will become an uncompounded phenomena, like the sky flower.
我的是吧？我等别小个人，
是去写送，
我等别小，
我之前
这几个字吧。
Yeah. So I will stop here. So I will stop here. Then you have any questions, then you can ask now.
Yeah, that's it. This is sell here.
Yeah, Kesha, I can see you. Yeah.
Can okay. Just want to know what are the differences between mere I and the I that is grasped by the self, grasping as truly existent. And also, do both of them share any similarities or not, if any?
So ini tanda nga tsam tang nga jing len gi jimbe nga sa de ini de ni gi kewa kare yo nas nga tsam tang nga jing gi jimbe nga sa de nga jing len gi jimbe nga de ni gi kewa kare yo me ini de ni yang jiba yo nas kewa tang kata di kewa tang ini de ni ji yo nas kata de ni 그래서 된지를 그러니까 해주 지면서
그래서 먼저 리시지 나서 돼 다른 주변 가진 지는 거로 와 다른 주변 가지로 와 먼저 리시지 배 다다배 뭔가 랑게 체인지 주변 가지 되는 인지도 거로 와 먼저 리시지 가지 배 랑게 체인지 주변 가진 지는 거래 바샤 다 차고 와 바샤가 다시 지단 나장서 가서 다니 이거 놓고 나장서 나장서 다니 게 되는 거 나장서 와 이제 치고 먼저 리시지 나서 돼 바샤가
한예 뒤에 요 마.
한예 너무 와
아니 대니 양 지면아 그 케바당 대니 케바로
나장서 다니 게 말이 해서 나장서 가서 다니 게 되는 거
제주 유명하다. 근데 대니 케바로 근데 대니라 가자디 와 지금 따다 되게 민도
그 되니 제발 요리했어 제발 요리 나장서 저 다니 게 말이 그 식으로 요리했어 나장서 먼저 리시지 진지게 나서 돼 바샤가 가서 요리했어 와 바샤 말하는 진지 좀
양 케추지 유연아 대니라 양 케추지 요바 된데 유연 케추지 요바 된데 유연 이 케바디로 케바다 that's all. In similarity, the kind of level.
新的一代
di na lo che wa ni yo. Ni tangin de ki shala sung ma de ke ba ro. De ni di ke ba res kan is na de ji tani de yo ba ji tani de yo ma ro. Ni de yang de ji yin ba de de yang yo nas. Ji ba yo ba. Ji ba ji gang ke chu ji ba ji gang yo nas de ni lo. Ke chu ji ba ji gang yo nas.
但记得过去不差的嘛的，记得过那里有这里，有个我的，就是从那有了，就是有的，那里那边我的，那边我怎么，去差的有嘛，好了，没办法，
That's all. Yeah, so the difference between a mere I and an I that is apprehended by the self, innate self grasping as truly existent, so they are different. So the difference is mere I exists conventionally, and the I that is apprehended by the innate self grasping as existing truly or intrinsically existent, so does not exist even conventionally. And this I that is apprehended by the self grasping is the I or the self, which is the object of negation. So this I or the self or the person that is apprehended as inherently existent is the object of negation. So it related to the first point. So they are different.
但我这是我这个做大学就是什么，差不多，大学通过得了大平安章什么的话，大学通过得了大平安是什么？
大学通过了
大学通过得了大平安章是什么？安章是什么？
有哪
上天的大平安章是什么？就修我的是，但我这理解就知道那应该就是话，所以那得我是他高下人是不高兴啊的话，高下人是不高兴。
So mere I, so when we talk about mere I, so the mere I is the mere I that is imputed independent on the basis of imputation aggregate. So this is what mere I is. So mere I is the mere I that is imputed independent on the basis of imputation that aggregates. So this is what mere I is.
我也同意。
你打不有嘛咯意思啦？你曾經你開巴咯，開巴係但，你等等牙針但你解釋牙啲，你樣打沙藥呐？打不藥呐？打沙藥呐？
我了解也蛮可以。
你
開巴咯，基本不差的嘞。有不是基本不差的咯。
那所你打沙藥嘛咯？那所。Yeah, so there is only difference between this mere I and I that is apprehended by the innate self-grasping, and there is no similarity between these two.
这种办法是你下做的，你个大妹的时候就这个，那个大妹嘛，
yeah，
你个大妹的那个这个，大妹嘛大的是。
我你假沙到的。
假设是那，但你个大妹基本上不是。
我呢啲撈過樣啦。Yeah, so if you really want to assert the similarity between the mere I and the I that is apprehended by the self-grasping, then it would be both are selfless. Yeah, the mere I is selfless, and I that is apprehended by the innate self-grasping, which is the object of negation, is also selfless.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? All of us know that there are the past, present, and future. That's obvious to everybody. So my point is that all this can be summarized into the fact that everything, the I, all phenomena, the aggregates, goes from past to the present to the future. So if anything was inherently existing at all, they could not move into past, into the present, and into the future. So that would, to me, that is so obvious that everything is therefore inherently non-existent. Can we argue that? That nothing can actually be inherent at all. Nothing at all, in other words. Because otherwise you cannot go on, continue into the present and into the future. As you said, the continuum. It will be a different continuum. If everything is the same continuum, it be that a flower, a person, a a dog or whatever, if you continue from past into the present into the future, then obviously you cannot be inherently existent. So this is my point, that it's quite obvious that things cannot exist inherently. This is my argument.
So your argument is using the reasoning that if
Using this one simple reasoning of past, present,
come from the past, come from the past and go to the future, then this reason already
because
shows
everybody
that
knows the past, present, and future. There's nobody doesn't understand the past, present, and future. So if you can move from one moment into the next moment, you obviously cannot be inherently existent, isn't it? Meaning that inherently existent means it's autonomous. You are on your own. You are self-created. So you cannot continue. There's no continuity at all, isn't it?
That's all. Yeah, 你哋睇到你哋人生嘅記，人生嘅記嘛，都把啲下過嚟啦。你如果啲什麼當啦啲嘢啦，你還是呢，哪些啲去行業把啲變得美多一啲，去呢的，你我們呢採用吧，你點節目嚟啲都有的話，其實你怎麼下過去嘅？我們呢採用吧，但節目嚟拍嘅，你怎麼的下過去嘅？點我都唔有嘅啥，但係啲細胞的下過去嘅啥，未曾嘛，你細胞下過去嘅，你啲細胞的下過去嘅，那你啲細胞的必須當年，未曾嘛，佢看一把的，兩個嘛呢，那採用吧，節目拍咗啊，你競爭以往的，你競爭以，你我去看一把的，那是一度有嘛的，但是呢，上是一度有呢。你讓往啲做啲嘅啫，啲有咩把拉嘅嘢，有咩把差嘅嘢，點做？你至少做啲，只不過啲必須當那啲嘅啦，去扛一把，扛沙糖，去扛一把啲，我們你採用吧，起碼啦拍咗啊，啲係俾，你啲去扛沙，扛新嘅馬都吧，去扛新嘅馬都吧，你都做嘅啦，你拍啲on。
혼돈스러워. 그래서 엄마는 또 신경이 심하게 따라 하지 못하고 그래서 다다 믿고 그래. 야 혼돈스러워. 그래서 나이 주는 엄마도 심한 데 누가요 말아. 나 강사들 아직 조금 말에 전세 가서나 강사들 엄마는 되는데 심한 데 그래서나 그냥 전세 야분스게.
That's all. Yeah, so well said. So to prove that or to establish that person or any phenomena do not exist inherently because the person, for example, will come from the past and then it will go to the future. So similar to other phenomena. So so you can establish the non-inherent existence by using this reasoning. Cool.
So, I think you get stop here.
Yeah, so we'll stop here, and if you have any questions, then you can ask in the coming class. So we conclude this session with dedication. We dedicate the roots of virtue that we have accumulated. And then we dedicate these roots of virtue for all upholders of Buddha's teaching, mainly His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to live eons long with excellent health conditions, and may all their enlightened activities and holy wishes be accomplished instantaneously and spread in all 10 directions. In particular, we dedicate these roots of virtue for the swift return of unmistaken reincarnations of our beloved teacher, Dr. Lama Rinpoche. So may Rinpoche swiftly return and continue to turn the wheel of Dharma for the sake of teachings and sentient beings so that we will have the opportunity to receive the precious teaching from you again, Rinpoche. And we also dedicate these roots of virtue to the world peace, and may concern happiness prevail in the world, and may wars and conflicts that happens between countries and getting more and more. So may these wars and conflicts be pacified immediately, and may diseases and pandemic and etc., transmitting diseases and etc., and natural disaster be pacified immediately. And we also dedicate this to the world peace, and may excellent happiness prevail in the world. Begewa de tendang rowa kun la kan be na kiwa jitun lo sang rawa yi te pe rin ko rin do se je sho da ju sem jo rin bo je ma ke pa na ki kyu ji yan ba me ba yang kon te kon do be wa sho a we ji da ken ba dang kun do sam bo de yang de shin de te da kun ge je so da lo je ke wa de da dang je rap do ngo a wa rin bo je ma ke pa na ki kyu ji ke ba nya ba me ba yang kon te kon do be wa sho Tawa Rinpoche ma ke pano ki kyu chi ke ba nyama me ba yang ko le kondo pe wa shu. Je sung do ju be lang chi je se se kan che chen yu gen chana pe mo ten sen kya so la swa te so ju she le du shu. Ka te pe te ma lu ba ka le jung we sam be yi shin no ka tin su me ten sen kya so la swa te so tu she lun du shu. Ni ma ke se ni rang zo lo sang ke wa yem se ku ba je nong ja shi ki kya yu ma yu pe. Ke pe ke le zo yu su zu pe tu te Rinpoche she dang tu pe zi zi pe wa la na ya mi shu su pe ko cha se tu pe chen chen la ma so wa de pe de ma lu jung we ko ji bu. Wa ye te la ji tu zhen ma zi pe mo lo bu shi wa shi te yi re bang we dang chi zhen gen so chen la dang ki se dang ki tu ke la mo chen lu me te pe yang pe sa pe zong. Zi je pe do nyu xie zhu. Ra we ko we xin gang de pen dang de wa ma lu jung we ne che re se wang ten zeng gang so yi sha pe si te pa tu deng yu ji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kesha. Thank you, everyone.